Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary.
Hey guys, hope you're having an awesome day and enjoyed that 100th episode. I had so much fun hearing from you, getting your questions, and recording that episode. Hopefully you got some answers and maybe I'll do it again sometime in the future. Right now, I have different exciting news that I think you guys will love. Every Tuesday and every Thursday, there's going to be another episode. Now, this is not going to be the regular Monday, Wednesdays discussions where I pick the brains of all sorts of people. It's going to be an episode that I think those that wanted shorter episodes, remember those all the way in the beginning, are going to love these because these are going to be short episodes with the best advice from the previous episode. I mean, the ones that I think are the best. I want to pick out the best parts and give them to you in short little snippets. So in case you don't have time to listen to the whole thing, or you want to remember what we spoke about, or you want to go even deeper of what we spoke about, you could listen to these short marriage picks episodes. That's what they're going to be called every Tuesday and every Thursday. Excited? I'm super excited. So stay tuned for tomorrow's very first marriage picks episode. Okay. Now for today's episode, are you ready? We're going to talk about another topic that's been requested, setting boundaries, together with psychotherapist Liza Gold of goldtherapynyc.com. Yes, her links will be in the show notes so you can go and find them. Thank you so much, Liza, for being here. You want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and exactly what you do.
Of course. So I am a clinical social worker now in private practice. I started my own practice earlier this year. I've been in the field for 7 years. I work with teenagers, I work with adults, and my approach, this may not be familiar to your audience, is psychodynamic, meaning I use a very exploratory lens when I'm working with people. I think it's very helpful for people to accrue new skills in their lives, but I also think it's important to sort of dig and uncover and learn about parts of themselves that may otherwise be hidden or disguised. So, as I mentioned, I have a private practice, Gold Therapy, NYC. I have
You started, and wait, before you did that, you said you started this year. What did you do before?
I'll walk you through my history. So when I first graduated from Columbia University with my master's in social work, I worked for a substance abuse treatment program for a year. After that, I transitioned to a hospital-based setting where I worked in the outpatient mental health department for 3 years.
It's really different.
Yeah, it was wild. Incredible training, but definitely was not an easy job. I was working with a very acutely mentally ill population. And from there, I moved on to a private practice where I served as the administrative director. I continued to see patients during that time, but I had a largely administrative and supervisory role. And then from there, I launched my own practice.
What made you decide to start your own practice?
I've loved working in group settings, but I was really at the point that I did ready to be my own boss and to form a practice that aligns perfectly with my own therapeutic approach and philosophy. I now have 2 really wonderful therapists who work for me, and I find that our therapeutic styles complement one another really well. So, I'm full right now. I'm not accepting any new patients at this time. When people reach out to me wanting to do therapy with me, I feel very comfortable transitioning them to, Jenna and Jordan, the two therapists who work for me, because I know that they practice so similarly to me that, anyone who would be happy working with me, I think would be happy working with them.
So cool. Yeah, you don't have to when you're your own boss, do something that somebody else wants to say or have different, obviously everyone has their own approach and their own way of doing things. But when you're in a practice and there's different rules and stuff that you have to go according to them, and here you get to create them by yourself. So your approach is really understanding themselves and seeing what skills that they need.
It's essentially a combination. I mean, I think for the most part, patients who come to me are in it for the long haul. That doesn't necessarily mean forever, but I think that really effective treatment takes, a couple of years. I don't really believe in quick fixes. I think they're band-aids. But again, I think skills are helpful. Learning communication skills or learning coping skills are helpful to a point. But if you find yourself repeating the same patterns over and over again, there's only so far that skills will take you.
Yeah, I think it's the opposite. It's first learning about yourself and then based on that, the skills. It could be I'm wrong, but
I don't know that it's necessarily one or the other. I mean, I think they can, yeah, I mean, I could see that. I think that it's easy to kind of, apply both approaches in tandem.
yeah. Okay. Awesome. Now, out of curiosity, is there like a specific skill that you see the most that people lack?
Communication, effective communication. They might think that they're angry, but they're really hurt, or they might think that they're feeling ashamed, but they're really angry. I mean, people, I think, have a hard time, first and foremost, understanding exactly what it is that they're feeling, which makes it very hard to articulate. I think many people have a hard time being assertive. On the flip side, sometimes people can be too assertive and it comes across as aggressive, which can be problematic as well. And I think a lot of people have a hard time asking for what they need, which again falls back to sometimes having a hard time even knowing what it is that they need.
Yeah, I always say before communication comes self-awareness, because you first have to know what's what. Okay. So now going into what we're talking about today, setting boundaries. And when someone's in a marriage, then, right, we're in this partnership together. We're in this relationship together. And it's not like a parent-child where you're setting boundaries to raise the parent, like to raise your kid or a student teacher or anything of that sort. So it's really different. How can you make sure you're setting boundaries to take care of yourself, but at the same time, you're not controlling your partner or doing any sort of manipulation?
Well, I would hope that those patterns are established before the marriage happens. I mean, oftentimes when people, when you meet someone new, you enter, and you fall in love, you enter what's called the honeymoon phase, which is this incredible experience where there's essentially a dissolution of boundaries. And that's why that honeymoon phase feels so good, is because you almost enter into the state of fusion with another person. And during that time, usually the first 6 months to a year of a new relationship, you're more focused on how you and your partner are alike, right? I mean, that's what feels so good, is we have so much in common. We're so similar. We're so compatible. It's only after time that some differences emerge and are more clearly recognized. And that's really when boundaries can be established. Not that they're not established before, but before there's such a loosening of boundaries as you're letting somebody in. I would never tell someone when they should or shouldn't get married, but I do think that when people rush into marriage prematurely before the honeymoon phase ends, they're often disillusioned by this feeling of, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? All these issues are cropping up, but they didn't exist before. And they didn't exist before because you were in a blissful honeymoon state.
So is there a way to put those boundaries before, or you think it's better to just wait afterwards to see what problems come up and then put those boundaries?
I don't think a marriage is doomed simply because you choose to get married during the early phase of a relationship. But I would wonder what the rush is about. If I were exploring this with a patient, again, I work very diligently not to bring my own biases or my own feelings or opinions into the room. If this topic were being explored, initiated by a patient, I might ask, was there a sense of urgency? I'd be very curious about the decision to marry at the point that they did, as opposed to giving it more time.
Is there any need for any boundaries in this phase, or like because of the phase and the situation, there's just no need for it?
There's always a need for boundaries at any point in time. I mean, and I would never, I wouldn't say that there's ever a point in a relationship where there shouldn't be boundaries. I think organically, boundaries tend to be loosest early on in a relationship when you're letting someone in and your gate is down, right? So that doesn't mean though that you can never say no, or you can never have limits, or you can never practice self-care, right? So, let's say you're in a new relationship and you and your partner have just spent 3 nights together and you decide that you want to spend a night alone. Spend that night alone. I mean, that's a boundary, so to speak, right? You're saying, I need some alone time. it's important to take it. I mean, you have to maintain your sense of self. It's really the sense of self that gets not altogether lost, but it gets muddled in the early phase, which is why that experience, the honeymoon phase, feels so ecstatic, is because it's not just you anymore. It's like you've merged with another person. It's like your two souls have become one, right? So after the honeymoon phase, that feeling fades a little bit and you kind of find yourself again. And now you're at a new phase in the relationship where you both sort of differentiated from each other. And then you get to figure out, okay, what are our lives going to look like together moving forward at this point?
Right. So at that point, when you're ready to make the honeymoon phase is going out and life starts to hit you, how do you start really setting boundaries and making sure your sense of self is there and you're doing it in the right way?
Well, I think most important is being in tune with yourself, right? Because ultimately, boundaries distinguish you from other, right? So your boundaries delineate what belongs to you, your thoughts, your feelings, your values, your preferences, right? Those are your boundaries, so to speak. Right? A boundary is just sort of a metaphor for what's yours, right? So at some point when you're navigating the relationship and there's some differentiation that's happened because honeymoon phase is fading, so to speak, then it's really time to figure out what do I want the relationship to look like moving forward? What do I need to do to be my healthiest self moving forward? If it's 1 year in, am I ready to move in with my partner? Or do I need more time on my own, right? Is it going to, I'm using moving in together, cohabitation as an example, right? So let's say your partner asks you after a year to move in with him or her again. And you have to decide, am I ready? What am I giving up? Am I comfortable giving up what I'm giving up to move in with them? Am I ready to make this phase? What does it mean to live with someone? And if you decide that you're not ready, it would be important to listen to yourself, right? A lot of people make decisions because they're scared of, there's a fear of abandonment. Like, can I say no? Will my partner leave me? But I think it's really important to be able to set boundaries when you need to and take care of yourself, right? I mean, otherwise a codependent relationship emerges.
Yeah. So how do you make sure that your sense of self is there and you really know about yourself and putting yourself first without going and being so-called selfish and not caring about the relationship?
Well, that's sort of the difference between healthy narcissism and malignant narcissism, right? I mean, we think of narcissism, we think of selfishness, but selfishness isn't always such a bad thing. And I'll give you an example from my own personal life. At night, when my husband's finished, when we're both finished working, and we finish dinner, and he has his nighttime shower, he usually likes to go with me into the living room to watch some TV. Most of the time, I enjoy that routine. There are times where I'm in bed, curled up with a book, and I just want to be alone. You could argue that it's selfish of me not to be with my husband on those nights when I choose to stay in the bedroom and read, but I know that I need that. I know that those moments nourish me, right? And has nothing to do with my love for him, or it has nothing to do with not wanting to be with him. I'm in tune with myself and know I need some alone time. And I feel secure enough in the relationship to know that my husband doesn't personalize those decisions.
He knows that you need it to take care of yourself. And I think that afterwards, when you go back to him, your emotional bank account is filled because you took care of yourself. And even if you were to decide that, no, I'm doing this for him, so cool, and I want to stay in bed, but I'm going to be with him, I don't think it will be such a good experience because really that's not what you need right now. And you won't be able to give your best self.
That's right. So let's say there was an element of codependence or enmeshment, and he asked me to join him in the living room, and I begrudgingly went with him, right? I'm giving up an important activity for myself, a nourishing, calming, self-soothing, enjoyable activity. I love reading, and I'm with him. I may resent him for that, right? Which wouldn't necessarily be fair, right? Because I've made the decision to join him in the living room. Right? I need to own that. However, it doesn't usually happen that way, right? So if I feel like, oh, he's going to be angry if I don't join him, or he's not going to speak to me if I don't join him. And if I were to, I think I would end up having some really uncomfortable feelings like frustration and resentment, and it wouldn't be enjoyable for either of us. I mean, I wouldn't enjoy his company in that situation, and he certainly wouldn't enjoy mine.
Yeah. And by you taking, I think like what you said about responsibility is a really good like mind shifting, because when you realize that he's the one who made you come into the living room and go watch with him, you are the one that's choosing whether you should go read or whether you should go be with him. So you are like a mature, responsible way or taking care of your actions, being responsible for what you're deciding to do. And then you can go and decide what's the right thing.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm very lucky in my relationship. I think the two of us communicate incredibly well with one another. If my husband really wanted to spend some time with me on a particular night, he doesn't normally push. So if he were to push, I would know that that's, an anomaly for him. And I may say, okay, sure. But tomorrow night I'm getting my book time.
Right.
So in that sense, there's a negotiation or compromise. But we, another boundary, so to speak. My husband's a golfer, and when it's nice out, he golfs most weekends. Like he'll pick a Saturday or Sunday and spend the day golfing. He'll go to a friend's country club. He'll go to, a public course. And I remember one summer, maybe it was 2 summers ago or last summer before the pandemic, he had gone golfing 3 Sundays in a row, but he had also worked 3 Saturdays in a row. And so I didn't get to spend really any time with him over the weekend. And, I had realized a need I had was to spend more time with him. And so, I sat down with him and said, I don't mind at all that you love to golf. That's your time. It's your time away from me. And it's your time to just, enjoy yourself. But there needs to be a balance, where you can do that, but also make sure that you're tending to our relationship. Because I don't want to be left alone for weekends at a time. And he was very receptive to that. And he's never again, during his busy seasons at work, when he's working weekends, he's never again golfed 3 weekends in a row, which I really appreciate.
So he knows like what, you would communicated your needs so that way he could go and respond them to you. And I think, like you said, it's a lot having to do with communication of understanding what you really need. So that way you're not just setting boundaries because, I'm telling you to do this, or I want this to be a specific way. It's a real need that you have. Once you can really understand that, you can make sure you're going and setting that right.
Absolutely. It all falls back to communication.
So what communication tips do you have for people listening so that way they could really go and communicate better?
Well, with respect to what particular arena?
Well, here we're talking about boundaries, but I'm curious to know, besides for that, if there's anything else specifically on your mind right now.
Sure. I think, when we ask for something, to own it, right? If we're going to ask our partner for something, we need to do so in a way without making our partners feel like they're bad people, right? So again, with a really simple golf example, when I communicated my need to him, I owned that it was my need, right? I need more. So making sure that I wasn't making him feel bad about himself in the process. He had done nothing wrong. I didn't say you're selfish, you're a jerk, you're thoughtless, you don't think about me. I think it's very dangerous when we start labeling and using hurtful words. So I think being really mindful of how you ask for something, and to avoid labeling and to really own your feelings.
Yeah. Because for some people, they would have really liked it that their husband was going out 3 times a week, through every Sunday. They get to have more time to go and do more things, to have more time than themselves. So really, it's not his problem. Like he enjoys that. It's not his fault that that's what he's doing. It's not a bad thing. You yourself want more time, so you're taking responsibility for that. Okay, so just going back to boundaries for a second, we just spoke about with your spouse. Now, there's also a lot of boundaries that we constantly have to put throughout the day with our coworkers, our friends, our children. How is that different than in our intimate relationship?
I think the more intimate the relationship, the more flexibility there may be with boundaries. Whereas with someone like a coworker, the boundaries are pretty clearly defined, right? For example, there are certain personal questions that I may never ask a coworker or a colleague that I would feel comfortable asking my partner, right? So I think with partners, our boundaries, or with anyone we're really intimate with, our boundaries are much looser. right? Whereas with people where there's not a great deal or any intimacy in the relationship, the boundaries are much more clearly defined and much firmer.
Yeah, that's why. And I think it's much harder for people to wrap their head around the boundaries with their partner because, like you said, they're much more loose, they're much more open, and there's much more room for flexibility and negotiation with it. Versus, like, if a boss tells you to be there 9 a.m., you could negotiate, but if he wants you to be there 9 a.m., you have to be there 9 a.m. Versus with your partner, you could go and say, oh, this is not working for me today, and things like that.
That's right. That's right. There's a lot more room for back and forth dialogue, for negotiation, for compromise, for self-expression, depending on the role that another person plays in our lives. I mean, roles really define boundaries, right? So the boundaries that you have as an employee, as the role of employee, are going to be very different than the boundaries you have as a partner.
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to raising kids and putting boundaries, then it gets even more difficult because there's your sense that you still have to take care of yourself and you have your own boundaries. But then at the same time, some of the things you're doing is to raise your kids and you want them to be so called a certain way. I don't like what that, like, I don't believe in that your kids have to be a certain way, but I think that's just the simplest way to explain it of you're putting these boundaries because you don't want them to do bad things.
Sure. Right. Well, you're role modeling ethical behavior. You're role modeling pro-social behavior. You're role modeling, to your children, the kind of person you want them to be.
Right. So how do you balance that and make sure that you're still putting those boundaries? You know what boundaries are for yourself and what boundaries are just because, like, you wish your child would be a different way. For example, if your kid, let's say, comes into your bed every morning, your 4-year-old son, and bothers you and annoys you when he's 4 years old, he doesn't need to be in your bed every morning, right? Then that is a boundary for yourself and you could take care of yourself. But boundaries of, let's say, which friends your kids could be with is different type of boundary because it's not especially for yourself. It's more you want them to spend time with certain type of people.
Sure. So you're saying there's boundaries within the family and then there's different boundaries outside the family.
Yeah, but not so much the family and outside the family. More, some of them are for yourself, like your own sense of self, like we're right. And some of them are more for raising your kids.
Sure. Right. So in the service of your child's social life, the children you do or don't want them around, right? So you're setting for many years, you're going to be setting boundaries for your children, right? With the leading assumption that children are growing and haven't learned. How can you promote that in your child's life? So are there, if, for example, there's a child who don't want your kid around. I mean, I would really want to identify what are those reasons, right? Maybe there's a child in the class who hits all the time, who talks back to his parents, right? You don't want that role model to your child. So you want to protect your child from exposure to that kind of behavior, right? Children are very malleable and influential, right? So with that awareness, you want to be very careful what they're exposed to.
Right. But how could you make sure that it's not you yourself, you're not getting your own self in the way of your child's life? Meaning, right? Like, you understand the question?
Yeah. Well, we're going to elaborate because I'm happy to listen.
No, I'm just saying, like, just going back to the example I said before, some of the boundaries are for yourself, right? Like your sense of self. And those are the boundaries that you're having in your relationship. Because in your relationship, you're not trying to change your partner, right? You're not having that. When you're raising kids, hopefully they are changing and you want them to go in the right direction.
You are trying to shape them.
Right.
Right.
So it's a little different, but at the same time, you want to let them be their own person without getting yourself in their way. You want them to take a specific career path and they want to do something else. Or you want them to do even like a little kid, you take them to the library or to a bookstore to pick out a book. And you think, hey, they should be taking this book and they want this book. And not because it's like inappropriate, I'm not talking about, but you think this is cooler. Like, no, let your kid take that book because that book they want that. And that's theirs. Like, I think kids should pick out their clothing from when they're like 2, when they could start at least dressing somewhat normally, So how could you make sure that your self is not going into your child, but you're still setting boundaries in the right way?
A great question. I completely understand what you're asking. And what you're naming right now, what you're pointing out is one of the most difficult things for parents to do. I mean, I can't tell you how many peers I went to school with who killed themselves in school to make straight A's because their parents expected them to attend Ivy League universities, or who killed themselves to get into great schools because their parents expected them to be lawyers or doctors. Or whose parents, I'm not letting you out of the house dressed that way. Or children who come out as part of the LGBTQIA plus community, how hard it is for some parents when their child is no longer a reflection of who they are, right? So ultimately, I think all parents, whether they recognize it or not, want their children to reflect who they are, right? And it's hard, I think, for some parents don't struggle with this, but some parents have a very hard time when their children's identity veers off course into another direction, right? They have a very hard time accepting this is who you've decided to be, even though it's not who I wanted you to be. It becomes a problem when mom or dad's opinions or feelings are then imposed on the child, who then feels an immense sense of shame for simply being themselves. I think it, first and foremost starts with a lot of awareness, right? What do you want for your child? But why is the important question. Why do you want this for your child? You want your child to go to Harvard. Okay, why? What is it about Harvard that's going to propel your child where they need to go that, say, a different school can't? Is it just the name and prestige, right? I mean, so I think the question of what you want for your child and why is a really important question. Let's say your 5-year-old daughter puts on an outfit that you personally think is absurd, but she wants to wear it to the park, right? So a good question would be, why does her outfit bother me so much? Okay. If your answer, and if you're honest with yourself, I promise the answer is going to be because it's embarrassing. People are going to think that this is how I chose to dress her. Who cares? Who cares? She's experimenting with her identity. She's expressing herself, right? If she wants to wear mismatched colors and rain boots on a sunny day, that's bringing her joy. You're teaching her that she can choose who she wants to be, and that you support her no matter who she chooses to be.
Yeah. So that question of why is a really good one, because it's not just like, okay, don't do this. Why not?
Right.
And then going back to yourself, if it's because of yourself, going back, your kid is coming into your bed and you need your space in the morning, go ahead and put that boundary. Right.
Well, and that may be because mom and dad or whomever, it could be dad, mama. I apologize for the generalizations. That may be because, as a parent, you need a certain amount of time to wake up in order to be the best parent you can be, right? In order to be fully present for your child, those 15 minutes when you wake up and remain in bed are crucial for you, right? So you have to set that boundary so that you can be the parent that you need to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's really understanding the deeper reasons to everything.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, so for our very last question that I ask everyone, how would you describe an extraordinary relationship without using these 3 words? Love, connection, and communication.
Wow, that's a hard one. Okay. I think an extraordinary relationship is characterized by mutual respect, reciprocal kindness, compassion, empathy, understanding, openness, and honesty. If you're in a relationship with someone and you feel free to express your true feelings, your honest thoughts, your honest opinions, and those thoughts, feelings, and opinions are met with respect and understanding, I think that's an extraordinary relationship.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Liza. This was amazing.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And to any of your listeners, if anyone is interested in learning more about my practice or connecting with me, I would encourage them to go to my website, goldtherapynyc.com.
Amazing. Thank you.
Did you enjoy that episode?
could you do me a personal favor and subscribe and leave a review? It would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.